English 121, Day 21, Logical Fallacies, from the Allen and Bacon Guide, pages 395 to 97. Informal fallacies are instances of murky reasoning that can cloud an argument and lead to unsound conclusions. It's very important that you learn to recognize fallacies in others' argumentative writing, as well as avoid fallacies in your own argumentative writing. Confusing your opponent into silence does not mean you have won the argument. Let's look at a few types of logical fallacies more closely. The first is called post hoc ergo propter hoc. In Latin, this means after this, therefore, because of this. This type of fallacy involves mistaking sequence for cause. It's also similar to the difference between causation and correlation that we discussed at the beginning of the semester. Penguins are black and white. Some old TV shows are black and white. Therefore, some penguins are old TV shows. Logic, another thing that penguins aren't very good at. As we see here, this is merely a correlation, not a case of causation. Another common fallacy is called hasty generalization. This refers to claims based on insufficient or unrepresentative data. It's kind of like jumping to conclusions, and it relates to the idea of sensationalism from the articles that we read earlier in the semester, where people tend to believe the conclusions that they want to believe rather than conclusions that are necessarily based on evidence. Also be aware of false analogies. This is a comparison between two things that aren't really that similar. Remember that analogical arguments are tricky because there are usually significant differences between two things being compared, as well as the similarities that are present between them. All cats have 4 legs. I have 4 legs, therefore I am a cat. I just feel so sorry for this dog because he's so confused. Another common analogy is referred to as either-or reasoning. This occurs when a complex multi-sided issue is reduced to only 2 positions without acknowledging the possibility of other alternatives. This is kind of like what we see in our country's two-party system, where there's obviously a lot more options than the 2 parties that tend to be represented in national elections, and yet this is how we narrow it down to make the system work. It's very important in your argumentative writing to acknowledge diverse perspectives and multiple points of view. Also watch out for ad hominem, which in Latin means an attack against the person. When people can't find fault with an argument, they sometimes attack the arguer, substituting irrelevant assertions about that person's character for an analysis of the argument itself. Ad hominem kitten says, "You're wrong because you're stupid." Don't get duped by appeals to false authority or bandwagon appeals. These offer as support the fact that a famous person or many people already support it. It's kind of like the lemming argument. You've also probably heard of non sequiturs. In Latin, this means it does not follow. This occurs when there is no evident connection between a claim and its reason. Make sure that your reasons are logically connected to the claims that you're making. Well, I have an owl, so you're wrong. An easy one to recognize is circular reasoning. This occurs when you state your claim and then, usually after merely rewording it, state it as your reason. Circular reasoning works because, circular reasoning works because, circular reasoning works because. Your book also talks about what's called a red herring. This refers to the practice of raising an unrelated or irrelevant point deliberately to throw an audience off track. It relates to the practice of using fish to throw dogs off the scent in hunting. We make Virginia Slims especially for women because they are biologically superior to men. You've come a long way, baby. I don't even know what that means. Finally, you really want to watch out for slippery slope arguments. This is based on the fear that one step in a direction we don't like inevitably leads to the next step with no stopping place. There have to be real causal connections between two events in order for causal arguments to be successful. You can't assume that anything is going to happen in the future because we can't predict the future. These kinds of arguments are especially common in political debates. Watch out for informal fallacies to make your arguments as persuasive as possible.